Welcome to a Man Skorned, episode 2. I'm your host, Trevor Christensen, and this is my twice a month podcast, videocast about Skorn. If you're not sure who I am or you haven't seen one of these before, if this is your first one, you might want to go back to the first one and watch it first. But this is episode 2. I am a Skorn player. I've been so for about 5 years. I probably am going to be playing Skorn at the WTC this year for Team USA White. So that's a little bit about me. You can see I have a little bit of art for me in Skorn armor that I like to throw up every once in a while. Eventually it'll get finished, just not anytime soon. So about the WTC real quickly, I wanted to mention it again because my team is in need of funding, and there are 5 of us who are headed to Amsterdam this year, and we could use your help. This podcast videocast series I'm doing so that I can help my team get there. For the most part, I'm already paid for. I can get there on my own, but I know that some of my teammates are in a little bit in need of having some extra help. So if you can do so, the shows that I'm doing are being funded through Patreon. So if you can go to Patreon and support this videocast, I would appreciate it. Just a few dollars per episode, they add up. If you go there and commit to giving $1 or $2 per episode, I will continue to do these throughout the summer, and all the money that I earn via Patreon will go towards my team. So I think it's an important thing to help this community. I know there are lots of teams this time of year that are looking for money, and we're just one of the many. So I know that it's hard to help everybody. So if you decide to help another team, I applaud you. If you decide to help me, I thank you. But whatever you can do to help the event happen, I think eventually the game will progress to a point where we'll have sponsorships and Twitch streaming to the point where it'll hopefully pay for itself in many ways. But right now it is not self-sufficient, and we need everybody at home, everybody that plays this game, to help out to be able to get all the teams there. And obviously the US team is not the one that's going the farthest. There are other teams that need help worse than we do. So keep that in mind as you help the other teams, but we appreciate it. Whatever you do, regardless of what group you support, anything you can do to help the WTC happen year after year, I think it's an important event for our community, and I hope that this year is as successful as it's been in the past with a new version and a new edition, but I think it will be, but it's going to take your guys' support. So let's just jump right in. The format of my show is that I talk a little bit about Skorn. Eventually I'm going to talk about lists and other things, but this first few episodes, probably maybe the first dozen episodes or so, I'm going to talk about the models in the faction. And I'm going to talk about what makes them good or what makes them bad, or where they're good at, or what they do to define our faction. And the first one is probably the most faction defining model that I can think of, and that's the Agonizer. For better or for worse, the Agonizer is hands down the most faction defining in Mark III for us. If you went back to Mark II, I don't think the Agonizer was. I think it probably was the Paingiver Beast Handlers in Mark II. In this new edition, the Agonizer, I think, has taken that spot. Now, is it deserved or is it worth it? I'm not sure. I look at it and it has become our Krellstone, our choir, our stones, if you want to make the circle comparison. And it is, of all of those, it's easier to kill. It's only in a single model. It has to be closer to the target than most of those. It costs more than most of those, and it has a reduced impact in comparison to some of those. I think that it has as much or more than some of them, but things like the Krellstone, it doesn't have as much impact, and because it doesn't normally affect ranged attacks and things like that. So, like I said, for better or for worse, this is our faction defining model. He is only defense 12, armor 13, he's got 13 wounds, and he has to be standing close enough to cover your opponent. He also only works against strength-based attacks, so if you're being shot, it doesn't do anything. So our faction is heavily reliant upon this model. I feel like in many cases you are going to have one in both pairings. You're going to have to figure out, one in either of your two pairings in a tournament's pairing list. You're going to have to figure out how to keep him alive, and a big part of your list is going to be based on keeping a 7-point model alive that has defense 12, armor 13, and 13 wounds, which I'm going to keep coming back to because those defensive stats aren't that great. In Mark II, he was about the same as far as the difficulty to kill, although he was more survivable against low POW and strength attacks. But he would still die fairly easily, but the truth is that we didn't rely on him as much. We saw defense 12 Titans, and we had other things that could help defend us. The Agonizer now is such a big part of what we've become that I don't know that we can ignore trying to protect him. You just can't take one in every list and say, all right, I'm just going to throw him out there and I'm not going to do anything about it. Because at that point, it's just 7 wasted points, and you might as well have built a list around something else. Tried to avoid using the Agonizer. However, the Agonizer is a big part of what we've become, and I think that we can leverage that to be very strong in the meta. The Agonizer, placed behind a unit of Satrati or behind Tiberian or a Sentry, really puts us in a position where we can be one of the better armor skew factions, especially if we can keep him alive. Now, it's going to be difficult, especially against the spell slinging factions, the ones that can come around the edge and get to him and kill him with a single attack. Those are going to be far more difficult. So anything we can do to sort of protect that, I think, is a big deal. So as you think about your list, I think you should think heavily about why you're taking an Agonizer. If it's not something that's worth taking, then you should probably take him out because he's more than a 7-point investment. And if you're not getting that 7 points out of him, you might be better off trying to build a list that's different, something that's fast or something that can flank or something that's got a different approach to the game, maybe a ranged attacks. And I don't think the Agonizer should become something you put in every single list. So I'm excited for the Agonizer. I think it's a good core model. I worry that maybe too much of our identity has become the Agonizer, and that's something that we're going to have to figure out. Hopefully he's not too much of our identity and that we can use him where necessary and not use him in other places, but I'm afraid that maybe he is. So the next model I'd like to talk about is the Taskmaster, the Paingiver Taskmaster. Now the Taskmaster was another model that in Mark II was a big part of our faction. However, in this particular case, I feel like he's no longer a valid choice in I'm going to say 95% of the lists that we're going to create, even the ones that have minions in them. I just feel like he's a tax that doesn't do enough for what he does. He costs too much for what he does. So the Taskmaster, I feel like, is one of the models in the transition that just we're not going to see. I don't really see any point to giving minion models +2 strength when it's going to cost us 4 extra points to do it. Now that's the same cost he had before, but he has a drastically reduced impact. He only gives tough to models within 3 inches. His no slipping on the job lost 2 inches. So if I think that you might see him with Brigands, because they have tough naturally, and the 7-inch range might help them quite a bit. And if you take them with the Warlord, they have Prey, and you can add the Taskmaster in. I think that's going to be the 5% situation where we're going to take him. That's it. I can't think of any other situation in minions, and maybe I'm forgetting something, but I think that that's pretty much the only place that you're going to take him. With Prey and with Pain Driver. With Pain Driver and Prey, the Brigands are going to hit pretty hard. I think that it's something you're going to have to build for, though. Unlike most of our faction, there's very few models that have, very few casters that have friendly buffs anymore. So there's really not much we can do from them. They really need to be self-sufficient, which is the Brigands are. They're one of the few units now in Mark III that we can take that I think are self-sufficient to the max, and so adding him in might be a good thing, but honestly half the time the Brigands alone might just be the better choice. 4 extra points on top of the Brigands might be too much. So I'm a little disappointed in the Paingiver Taskmaster. I'm disappointed that the faction that's supposed to cause, be the slavery faction, we make all of these other models work for us, just kind of been taken away from us. We can't seem to do anything for them, and the Taskmaster doesn't really do anything for them either. So it's one of the bigger disappointments that I've had in the transition, and I don't know what else to say about it other than I I think that there's a few situations, but outside of the brigands, I'm just not seeing it. So let's go on to the next model that I want to talk about, and that's the beast handlers. So there's a lot of people who are upset about the changes to Enrage and the changes to the ability to remove Fury. I can't think of what it's called right now. Condition, excuse me. So people were angered about Enrage and Condition. I've played these units. I mean, this is obviously the core unit to the faction, even in Mark III, and I've played this a lot now. I mean, it's been in almost every single list, and I actually think that the Paingiver Beast Handlers got buffed. I think that they're better than what they were. Unfortunately, because of how hard Titans got hit, it feels like a nerf a lot of the time, but it's really not. The major things that can happen here that we need to think about, you know, while Condition can only pull one off, we still have a numerous number of models that we can put on the table for a somewhat expensive price, I will admit, but I think that's worth it, especially if you're careful and don't overcommit the amount of support you get and you just grab, say, one max unit of Paingivers or 2 min units. I think in a very few lists, maybe with my Naresh list, I'm considering a min unit and a max unit. But beyond that, I don't think you'd ever take 2 max units. I think I can't think of any situation where you would have enough Fury on the table where that would matter. But the part that's the buff and the part that's important is that you can heal a beast 3, 4 more potentially times with these guys. Additionally, you don't have to charge with Enrage. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, we don't get a free charge anymore. I understand that. In fact, it pains me to think about it, that we have no free charges in the faction whatsoever. But the Paingiver Beast Handlers allow us to do things that we could never do before. Things where I needed to throw a model and make sure that it succeeded, and there were situations where, you know, if I rolled double ones and they rolled a 6 or whatever it happens to be, and that's kind of an extreme case, but you know, my Gladiator moves up and I need to throw a model and it needs to happen, and I want to make sure that there's no possibility that it fails. This helps. I give him +2 strength, I walk up, I throw him, and you know, whatever model I'm throwing, now I'm throwing at strength 14 and they're rolling 1 die, and you know, on the minimum I'm going to roll is 16, which means in most cases I'm going to succeed against a big portion of the game, and against the models that are close that have like strength 12 and stuff, they have a very tough chance of trying to stop me. So that's kind of a big deal, being able to do these sorts of power attacks and these sorts of things that you just couldn't do before. In one of my games I was able to put Enrage on a beast and then have him walk up to a location where he had 2 models that were on both sides of him, one on his left and one on his right. Where in Mark II, I would have never been able to do that. I would have had to turn to face my charge target, and I would not have been able to get both of them in my melee range. Being able to dictate what happens with the Enrage and walk up is a buff. So the problem is when you mix that in with the reduced Fury and the lack of charges, it feels like a nerf. And I'm gonna agree with that part of it, but I'm gonna assess that on the Titan end of it, not on the Paingiver Beast Handler end of it. The Paingiver Beast Handlers are still amazing, and the Enrage part of it, the Medicate part of it, and even the Condition part of it, being able to, you know, still be able to take off most of the Fury where necessary. I mean, you have to be a little more careful than you did before, but truthfully you can play them almost better in every situation than you could before, because of the ability to heal as much as you possibly can. I mean, I've played a couple of games where, you know, my opponent shot me on the approach for 6, 7, 8 damage, which normally would have just stayed until the end of the game. I would not have stopped to Enrage or stopped to Medicate because I needed Enrage or remove Fury. Now I can do both, and I can remove some of that damage, and truthfully a lot of that damage does come off now, and it's fairly easy to get up there. And my only hiccup is I have to keep remembering that the Medicate part of it is base to base. So hopefully you guys remember that better than I do, and you don't find yourself trying to Medicate from 2 inches out. But anyway, I think the Paingiver Beast Handlers have a solid spot. Obviously, I'm probably, you know, speaking to the choir here when it comes to Paingiver Beast Handlers, but I think people really need to look at them and say, what are some things that I can do with them with Enrage that I could have never done before? And those are the things that are really good. So it hurts that we don't have the ability to gain a free charge, or that we've lost so much fury, and that's some things that I'm going to cover as we kind of go over. I have some major issues with what some of the people in the community are saying about the Titan Sentry, and specifically the Titan Sentry, but there's a few other models that I feel like are a little bit lackluster and probably core to our identity that need some they need some help. And the fact that they lost both free charges and fury just it hurts too much, and I'm not exactly sure how we're going to overcome that shortcoming in comparison to what the other factions have. So anyway, that's enough about the Paingiver Beast Handlers. Let's move on, and I'm going to talk about one of my favorite casters from Mark II, and that's Guitar Hero Hexy. If you can see my Hexorus model on the screen there. He doesn't actually have a guitar from Guitar Hero like that. That's a little Photoshop job by me, but I love Guitar Hero Hexy, Hexorus 2, and I think that he's a very strong caster still in Mark II. I do worry that the meta has passed him by. So I want to talk a little bit about the changes that have happened to him. A couple of really big ones. The ability to arc through any beast is kind of a really big deal for him. Additionally, the reduced cost of Ashes to Ashes is kind of a big deal. It's, you know, obviously it has a less high end, but the ability to potentially cast it 3 times on feet turn, maybe 4 if you really want to get crazy, means that you're going to have a little bit more consistency. You're going to kill a lot more models, I think, over the full range of where you're going to be playing him. So I think Banishing Ward is one of the biggest things that I love that happened to him. His old spell, Arcane Reckoning, was kind of a worthless spell that did absolutely nothing. Banishing Ward is a big deal for him. You know, it puts him in a position where he's even stronger than he was against Crix, and I felt like he was one of our strongest answers to Crix. It also allows him to play into some other factions that he normally wouldn't have played into prior. Stuff like Circle, he could play into Circle before, but he's probably better at it now. Stuff like stopping dog piles and TKs and other things like that with a little Banishing Ward on a key model or key unit is kind of a big deal. So a couple other things that happened to him. The Razor Worm became advanced deploy with well, he had advanced deploy before, but he became extended leash, so I mean he can stand pretty much anywhere on the board and be in Hexorus's control area, which makes it fairly easy for you to get a arc node into somebody's back arc or around behind them, or to ignore the cover. So these are all big things that have happened to him. He's gotten straight up better in almost every way, and I've seen a lot of people that have struggled with him and don't understand how he works. And hopefully when we get a little bit farther in to this podcast series, this video cast series, I'll be able to come back and talk about him, because he's one of my favorite casters. I feel like I'm probably one of the stronger players of Hexorus 2 in the world. Maybe that's a bit arrogant to say, but I don't know too many people that actually play him that often, and I played him a ton. So he's changed and he's gotten better, and I think that's all good. There's very few things about him that has gotten worse, but I'm a little bit worried that the meta has sort of passed him by. So in Mark II, he was kind of our troop swarm, troop spam, anti-caster. He sort of filled a similar niche as some of the other casters like Mordekar, but I think he did the actual dealing with lots and lots of troops better than anybody else. There's a few other things he didn't do as well, but he certainly did the I can kill. I remember killing 20 Mechanothralls in one turn, and I killed I put 15 Black Dragons, corrosion on them from using slingers and things like that. I mean, you can do crazy things with him between Black Spot and his feed and other stuff. I mean, he'll kill whole units all on his own and then put Black Spot on another unit and basically kill all of them. I mean, 20 models a turn is not an issue for Hexorus. However, that being said, is that going to happen in Mark III? Are we going to even see 20 models on the table in one particular spot, or 30 models, or 40 models, or 70 models like we did in Mark III? I guarantee you're probably not going to see the 70 models. The 40 models is kind of the sweet spot for Hexorus, where he does it better than everybody else. And I'm just not sure we're going to see that. I mean, the truth is 30 might be kind of the max, more commonly, and 20 is going to be much more common. So has Hexorus got a place in a tournament list anymore? I don't even know. I'm not looking at him for my tournament pairing. I just look at him and I say, yeah, he's great, but the meta isn't where he's supposed to be. It's moved on. It's missed him. And he doesn't have a damage buff, which is something that you absolutely have got to have. And we don't have a damage buff in the faction that we can throw out for warrior models, whatever. We don't have a Kiss of Lilith. We don't have a, you know, I guess we have Despoiler. So maybe you could put together a Despoiler list with Hexorus 2. I haven't done it yet, so I don't know that it's even possible. I don't know how the points work out. I don't know that you can get all the tools you need in the list with Hexorus. Yeah, Despoiler is something we didn't have before that Hexorus might be able to do, but I think if you're going to build Hexorus, you've almost got to focus in on the armor part of it, and the Hexorus alone deal with the troop part of it. So that's a little bit of theory machine there. I don't actually know that. I've played him in Mark II, or Mark III, excuse me, but I sort of felt like there wasn't enough there to actually try to delve into it a little bit more. I feel like there's other options that are better for us in the current meta. So anyway, that's Hexorus 2. Let's go on, and we're going to talk about the next model that I have on my list, which is the Cyclops Raider. The Cyclops Raider is a 9-point light that is defense 13, armor 16, has a burst fire gun that's range 10, POW 12, up to POW 14 against a large base model or bigger. His animus is Far Strike, which is quality. I mean, that's what we had before, but it's self-only now. I'm going to tell you the truth. I can't see a situation where I'm going to play the Raider almost ever anymore. I think that there's better models out there. Straight up 1 point less Shaman. I think the Shaman is every bit as good or better than a Raider, and I would never ever take 2 Raiders when I could take a Raider and a Shaman and have the Shaman cast Far Strike as well and get everything I need out of the Shaman for a point less, plus the ability to add in Ghost Shot, or excuse me, I can't think of the ability. I think it's Ghost Shot, Ghost Sight on his gun, and the ability to remove enemy upkeeps off of my stuff, the ability to give +2 range to my caster. I mean, the Shaman just is a superior choice in almost every way because of the things that he does on top of being cheaper. So he also has reach on his weapon. He's just flat better than the Raider. In some cases you're probably going to have to get Far Strike into the list to want to take the Shaman, but the Shaman honestly doesn't need Far Strike to do a good job. And a lot of times you might have a Cannoneer in the list, and flat out, if you have a Cannoneer, there's zero reason to take a Raider. You're going to take a Shaman anyway. So I've looked at the Raider, I've played him several times in Mark III, and I'm really disappointed in what they did with him. I feel like he could have, maybe at 7 points, it feels like a better spot for him. I mean, that's dirt cheap, and now all of a sudden I have reason to take multiple Raiders. But at 9 points, he's overshadowed by the beasts that are less than him. So, I don't know, maybe you guys can share with me your thoughts on the Raider and tell me where you think he's a better fit, but I'm not seeing it, guys. I think that you can find a better choice. Honestly, I think the Cannoneer is a better choice. Cannoneer Shaman's a better choice. Even taking an Extoller Soul Ward is probably a better choice than the Raider. I mean, you can take 2 of them for that price, and while their range is shorter, they can still boost without any involvement from your caster, and they hit harder against living models. So I don't know. I'm hopeful that the Raider might see a point adjustment at some point. I don't expect it to happen anytime soon, but I think right now he's overcosted. So unfortunate, because I think it's a kind of a cool model. It's a cool concept. It just doesn't have a place right now. So let's go on to the next model that I want to talk about, which is the Cataphract Satrati. So when we first found out from the insider that they'd lost a defense and they'd lost 3 wounds, there was a lot of people that were calling the end of Cataphracts, the end of Satrati, and I will admit that I kind of fell into that sort of feeling a little bit at first as well. I've played the Satrati multiple times now. I've played them with one of the Makedas, I can't remember which. I played them with Xerxes 1, and I think that the Satrati are amazing. So they're a very expensive package. So when you're going to be putting them on the table, you're not going to put them on there as a they're not a tar pit unit. They're going to be your centerpiece unit. So that's a little bit hard to swallow sometimes, but there were times in Mark II where they could be built both ways. They were either your centerpiece unit, you take a Xerxes 1, put Defender's Ward on them, stack all these buffs on them, or kind of a side unit that you would throw in maybe in Fist. So I mean, we're talking about Xerxes in both situations, but I felt like they played somewhat different in both situations. You know, when I played them I played them in Makeda 1 quite a bit, and they were my centerpiece unit in Mark II. You know, put Savagery on them, move them up, move Defender's Ward onto them, you know, put a Tiberian or a Brute in the middle of them so that the Defender's Ward couldn't be removed, that sort of stuff. But you could also play them in almost any list and just say, okay, I'm going to send the Satrati off to on the flank, and with, you know, Shield Wall and the Weapon Master and stuff like that, they're going to be okay, especially with 8 wounds. That's no longer the case. I feel like Satrati are probably going to have to be the centerpiece unit. In many situations, I think you're going to have to take Vorkesh with them. I'm going to probably spend a little time talking about him later. I think that he's pretty important to the Satrati now. The buffs they made to him make him almost critical to the unit. So I don't want to get too far into him because I want to talk just about the Satrati right now, but I think that there's a good chance that you're going to be taking these as a centerpiece unit, and that 7 extra points, or 6 extra points, excuse me, of Vorkesh is just going to be worth it because you're already building a list all around these guys in the first place. So what I've done thus far is I've taken Satrati, I've taken Vorkesh. Vorkesh gives them steady. Vorkesh can hide in the back. They can't be targeted with spells. Now you can throw in into the little pocket behind them a Agonizer. Now the Agonizer is super protected because they can't be knocked down. You can give them tough if you want from the Willbreaker. You know, all these things start adding up, and you start getting in a lot of points. But the truth is you can get them to a point where your opponent really can't deal with them. And that's kind of what you're trying to do, is you're trying to build a list that's centered on the Satrati that gets to a point where they can't deal with them. Well, you know, that is what we tried to do before in Mark II, but we didn't have the strength of the Agonizer. The Agonizer says -2 to all these strength rolls. We've got enough shield guards now that on the approach you can protect the Satrati from the big shots, and you can keep that Agonizer in the back. And when they finally come in, if you've built the list around them, if you have them with Xerxes 1 with Defender's Ward, and you make them armor 24, that's pretty serious armor value, especially with the can't be targeted by enemy spells, not being able to reduce it in any way. It becomes very difficult. They almost have to have multiple ways to remove upkeeps, because like I said, there's so many ways to use shield guards in the game now. It's very hard to remove a Defender's Ward from these guys. So I think the Satrati's death is highly over publicized and not true. I think the Satrati are going to be a solid unit choice, but they are a unit that you need to put together a list that sort of features them and makes them primary to your design. So hopefully, if you find some good answers to that, you can share them with the community, because I think the Satrati still have a place, regardless of how many wounds they lost. You know, I think that the 5 wounds is still enough that if you can get them to those values, that they're still going to be difficult to deal with. Now, are they going to be in every list? No, they're, I mean, they're the quintessential option here. You know, we sort of make fun of that particular phrase, and we should, but they are an option here, and I think that there's interesting option that we can build around. So the last model I want to talk about, and then we'll take a few questions from the chat, is Tiberian. And Tiberian, I see people kind of going back and forth on him, whether or not he's worth it over a century, whether he's not. I see people saying he's amazing. I see people saying he's overcosted. He's not overcosted. He is amazing. I've played him a few times now, and he's always performed amazingly well. So I'm gonna compare him to the Century for just a minute, because I think some people that's kind of the natural choice. You're going to say, oh, well, am I going to play a Century, or am I going to play a Tiberian? Tiberian's 7 points more, which seems sizable, and it is. But the difference is that you get 2 additional wounds, 1 additional mat, plus 2 POW on the Tetsubo, which I think is probably the thing that most people overlook. You know, the difference between base power and strength 16 and base power and strength 18 is at the best part of the dice curve. So Tiberian is at the best, he's on the better part of that dice curve. And in the game that we're playing right now, which is hard to kill heavies, you have to be able to retaliate. and the sentry just does not do it as well as Tiberian does. So if they're not going to kill you, but you're going to fail to kill them back, why not take Tiberian and kill them back? Because that's what the sentry gives you. Sentry comes in, you get attacked, you get charged, whatever. They fail to kill the sentry. Sentry attacks back, but with 2 less POW and 1 less fury, he fails a lot of the time at being able to kill the heavy that came in on him. And then the next turn that heavy finishes him off and he's not able to make a good peace trade. Tiberian doesn't have that issue. Tiberian has 1 more fury. Tiberian has 1 more mat. Tiberian has +2 power and strength. Tiberian finishes heavies. I love Tiberian. I think that a beast with shields are a little bit broken. Not being able to ever remove the shield unless you can find a way behind them is such a big deal. Like, you just have to deal with these 32 boxes every single hit. Tiberian is worth the extra 7 points. In fact, a lot of my lists, if I want to have 2 shield guards and 2 heavies with shields on them, one is a sentry, the other will be Tiberian in almost every situation. I will find the extra 7 points somehow. I think that the Tiberian is a great way to protect the Agonizer, and obviously you're going to be taking one with Tiberian. I think that his Animus is straight up better and also is helpful with a lot of casters that want to be able to push models out of way or open up lanes. So I just don't see any reason why you wouldn't find a place to put Tiberian in your pairing. I think that he's superior to our other character beasts right now. He's the best in the faction, and if you're not playing him, you need to figure out why. So I didn't talk about the Agonizer's Animus either when we were talking about him. I think that his Animus is probably situationally great. For the most part, I don't know that you're going to use it all that often, but I found multiple situations, especially late game, where if my Agonizer's still alive and I have Repulsion available to me, same as Xerxes' Animus, those 2 Animuses together, you can just push models around, things that Skorned has never been able to do before. So I think if you don't forget that the Agonizer is more than just a -2 strength bot, and don't forget that Tiberian has the ability to push models out of the way as well. I think that we have some scenario plays that we've never had before with those 2 models, and I think that it's interesting that we can put them in some of our lists. And you know, depending on the caster, obviously you're not going to put Rasheth up there trying to bulldoze people away, but I did use Repulsion on Rasheth after somebody tried to come in deep into my lines. So it happens. It's something that we can totally do. So those are the models that I wanted to talk about this week. I think that they're important to our faction. They are key to what we are going to be as we work our way through Mark III. I hope you agree with me on some of that stuff, and if you don't, I hope you take the time to explain why. I would love to hear your ideas. For the most part, I think that we have, you know, some more options we've talked about here, and I've tried to, rather than episode 1 where I was pretty much positive on everything, I tried to intermingle a few things in here that I felt like were sort of waste and not great points, or that were only situational. You know, obviously the Citrati are situational, but I think they're great in those situations. So, you know, hopefully you can find places for these things. Everything is not everything that I mentioned here is not completely useless. There's just a lot of situations where there's very few times when I would take them. So anyway, let's get a little bit into any questions. Legionnaires in the chat asks, so is it worth to try and polish our stinkers? Maybe. Not right now, though. I think that it's probably not worth it to try to polish stinkers this early in a meta cycle. You know, I think that we're better off taking our strengths or finding our strengths and trying to leverage those the best we can. You know, I don't think there's any point to trying to pull stinkers up from the bottom of the barrel. It's just, it's a losing situation in most cases, because in most cases our gut feeling is right, they are stinkers. I just think you're probably wasting your time to try to take the gut feeling stinkers and bring them up. Now, a year from now or a year and a half from now, I'm going to tell you something different. I'm going to tell you, yes, it's probably worth it, because at that point we'll have established what we think are the stinkers and what are not, and at that point you can go back and say, okay, is this really a stinker? And you can spend some time not only at the table but also in theory working through it. I think you can find some situations where they're probably not stinkers. In fact, there are probably some really good situations for them. However, we're all learning here. I'm still learning, you're still learning. Everybody doesn't really know where Skorned's going. I don't think that we should be wasting our time on that. I think we should be taking our best casters, our best beasts, our best units, and our best solos, and we put them on the table, trying to put them in the best combinations and giving ourselves the best combination to win. We can worry about trying to fool people with things that aren't normal later. So, all right. Next question from Muns3. He asks, 2 Agonizers, just to have one through the whole game. This is something I've considered quite a bit, and I think that it's too expensive. I think you're better off, you're halfway to a gladiator. Like, I think you're better off taking a gladiator and trying to protect the Agonizer you have. I think if you spend too much time and too much effort on support, in an effort to try to keep your support alive, you won't have enough attacks to stop them from finding an angle on your support and killing your support, and you're just losing it. So, you know, I think there might be some lists out there where you will want 2 Agonizers. I can see a situation where maybe I'll, you know, I don't know if I'd have enough points, but I could send Satrati off to one flank with an Agonizer behind them, and I could send like a Sentry and maybe a couple of Brutes or something on our solo. I can't think of his name right now for some reason, but anyway, you could send an Agonizer off to that side. You know, he's protected on both sides. You spend a lot of points, but you're getting your value out. That might be a situation where you could, but most of the time I think it's just a waste. I think you're putting too many points in support, and we fell into that trap I think too much in Mark II. I think that Mark III is probably even more defined. Like, if you spend too much on support, you're probably going to be in pretty serious trouble. There's just too much. There's too much effective stuff in the game to allow your list to be overcome with support. I think that too many people are going to allow that to happen. You have to look at your list and say, do I have too much support? And if you do, you got to come back and just cut some stuff. So, there's a whole lot more questions here, but I'm a few minutes overdue. So, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get to everybody's questions. There's several there. Hopefully, after I get through a lot more of these model reviews, I might be able to cover a few more questions, and maybe I'll cut the model reviews back a little bit, but I think that I've probably got the right number here at about 6 or 7 model reviews each episode. So unfortunately I only got to 2 questions this week, but I appreciate you guys tuning in. I appreciate your support, and once again, if you can do anything to support our Patreon, I appreciate it. I'll mention it one more time. It is patreon.com/chainattacktv. If you go there, you can find out how to support this video stream, as well as some of my. I'm going to stream some games. I haven't got as many in as I would like in Mark III, but we're going to make that happen. You're going to start seeing some Skorned on the stream, and I'm going to charge for each of those. Again, all that money is going to go towards USA Team White, which I'm the captain of. So I know that they appreciate it, and I appreciate it as well. So once again, thank you for watching, and tune in another 2 weeks.